The young and the restless spoilers, the perfect plan. Victoria stood in the dimly lit room, her sharp gaze fixed on the map spread across the table. The air was heavy with tension, and the weight of her plan pressed down on her chest. She knew the stakes. If they wanted peace, true peace, Jordan had to die. Jordan wasn't just any enemy. She was a monster. A relentless, cunning force of chaos. People whispered her name in fear, as if speaking it too loudly might summon her wrath. Her reputation for being ruthless and reckless was unmatched. Few dared to cross her, and those who did rarely lived to tell the tale. But now, Jordan was vulnerable. Isolated. Her alliance with Ian Ward had crumbled, leaving her a lone wolf with no pack to defend her. Their falling out had turned them into mortal enemies, and Ian, no stranger to brutality, now sought to destroy her just as much as Victoria and her group did. For Victoria, Nikki, and the others, this was their chance. A fleeting window of opportunity to eliminate the one person who could unravel everything they had fought so hard to protect. Yet, it wasn't just about survival. It was about ensuring Jordan couldn't hurt anyone else ever again. The stakes. Victoria's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the storm brewing within her. "We do this clean, fast, and without mistakes," she said, her fingers tracing a path on the map that marked Jordan's known hideouts. "If we fail, she won't hesitate to come after us. She's not just dangerous, she's unstoppable if we give her even a sliver of a chance." Nikki nodded, her expression grim. This wasn't their first time dealing with a situation like this. The weight of past sins lingered in her gaze, memories of blood-stained hands and hastily dug graves flashing before her eyes. She knew the cost of what they were about to do, but she also knew the price of hesitation. For Sharon, the stakes were even higher. Somewhere out there, Jordan held the key to Sharon's survival. No one knew exactly where Sharon was, but they all knew one thing: if Jordan didn't talk, Sharon would die. Alone. Forgotten. Starving and desperate. Time was running out, and every second they spent planning was a second closer to Sharon's potential death. "We have to make her talk before," Nikki's voice trailed off, the unspoken horrors lingering in the air. Victoria met her mother's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They both knew what this meant. They had crossed this line before, committed the unspeakable to protect their own. But this time, Sharon's life hung in the balance. They couldn't afford to fail. The confrontation the night was cold and unforgiving as they approached the abandoned warehouse where Jordan was hiding. The building loomed like a shadow, its broken windows and peeling walls a testament to the darkness that resided within. Victoria led the way, her footsteps silent on the gravel. Nikki followed close behind, clutching a weapon she hoped she wouldn't have to use. They knew Jordan would fight. She always did. And if she sensed even a hint of weakness, she would exploit it without mercy. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of mildew and decay. Jordan's voice echoed from somewhere deep within the building, taunting and mocking. "So you finally found me," she sneered, stepping out from the shadows. Her eyes gleamed with a dangerous light, and her lips curled into a wicked smile. "What took you so long?" Victoria didn't flinch. "It ends tonight, Jordan. No more games." Jordan laughed, the sound sharp and chilling. "Oh, darling, you don't stand a chance. Do you know how many people have tried to kill me? I've outlived them all. And you'll be no different." The tension snapped like a taut wire, and chaos erupted. Jordan lunged, a blade flashing in her hand, and the room became a battlefield. Fists flew, weapons clashed, and the air was filled with the sound of struggle. The aftermath. When it was over, Jordan lay still on the cold concrete floor, her lifeless eyes staring into the void. Blood pooled beneath her, dark and unforgiving. Victoria stood over her, breathing heavily, the weight of what they had just done settling over her like a shroud. "We have to move fast," Nikki said, her voice shaking slightly. "We can't leave her here." Victoria nodded, her mind already racing through the next steps. They couldn't afford to leave any evidence. If the police found the body, it would lead straight to them. They had to bury her, somewhere remote, where no one would ever find her. The memories of past crimes resurfaced as they worked, the grim familiarity of digging a grave in the dead of night haunting their every move. But this time was different. This time, they weren't just burying a body, they were burying a monster. The unknown, but the danger wasn't over. Jordan had been their only lead to Sharon's whereabouts. Without her, they were left with nothing but questions and fading hope. What if we were wrong? Nikki asked, her voice trembling. What if she never knew where Sharon was? Victoria's jaw tightened. She knew. She had to. We'll figure it out. We'll find her. But doubt lingered, gnawing at the edges of their resolve. If Sharon was alive, she was running out of time. And if they couldn't find her soon, they would have to live with the guilt of her death. As they stood in the darkness, the grave now filled and hidden beneath layers of dirt, Victoria vowed to do whatever it took to bring Sharon home. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to lose her now. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Jordan may have been a monster, but she wasn't the only one lurking in the shadows. And as the night stretched on, Victoria couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited them in their quest for survival. A night of horror. A crossroad of decisions. The night had been a maelstrom of chaos and violence, leaving behind a silence that was more deafening than the gunshots that had rung out earlier. Jordan was down, her body slumped against the cold concrete floor, blood pooling beneath her. Victoria stood over her, gripping the still-smoking gun in her trembling hands. Beside her, Nikki's face was pale, her breath shallow, while Claire hovered in the shadows, her eyes wide with fear and doubt. They had achieved their goal, Jordan was defeated. The woman who had tormented so many, who had held secrets that could destroy lives, was finally silenced. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a wave of unease settled over the trio. Their purpose, their ultimate goal of finding Sharon, remained unfulfilled. Jordan, despite her cunning and brutality, had refused to reveal Sharon's location, even with death staring her in the face. Now, as her chest rose and fell faintly, the question loomed heavy in the air: what would they do next? The dread of unfinished business. Claire paced back and forth, her heels clicking against the floor in a steady rhythm. This isn't over, she said, her voice tight with anxiety. You shot her, yes, but she's not dead yet. If we leave her like this, what happens next? What if she survives? What if she comes back for us? Victoria glared at her, her voice cold and sharp. She won't survive. Look at her, Claire. She's as good as dead. But what if she doesn't die? Claire shot back, her tone tinged with desperation. What if she makes it through? We've already seen what she's capable of. She'll hunt us down, and this time, she won't give us the chance to fight back. Nikki, leaning against a nearby wall, rubbed her temples. The weight of the situation was pressing down on her like a lead blanket. We don't have time for this, she muttered. Jordan's not our problem anymore. Sharon is. We need to focus on finding her. But Jordan knows where Sharon is, Claire argued. She might be our only lead. We can't let her die. Not yet. A moral dilemma. Victoria's gaze shifted back to Jordan's bloodied form. Her breaths were shallow and uneven, but she was still alive. The thought of taking her to a hospital, of possibly saving the life of the very woman they had sworn to destroy, sent a shiver down Victoria's spine. It was unthinkable. Yet, without her, Sharon's fate seemed all but sealed. This is insane, Victoria said, her voice wavering for the first time that night. After everything she's done, after all the lives she's ruined, you want to save her? I'm not saying we save her, Claire replied, her voice firm. I'm saying we keep her alive long enough to get the truth out of her. If she dies now, we lose everything. Sharon dies because we were too impatient. The room fell silent as the weight of Claire's words sank in. They all knew she was right, but the implications of her suggestion were almost too much to bear. "The clock is ticking." Nikki broke the silence, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "If we're going to do this, we need to decide now. She doesn't have much time." Victoria hesitated, her mind racing through the possibilities. Taking Jordan to a hospital was risky. The authorities would ask questions, and it wouldn't take much for them to piece together the truth. But leaving her to die, while Sharon's life hung in the balance, felt equally unthinkable. "We can't take her to a hospital," Victoria said finally. "But maybe we can stabilize her. Keep her alive just long enough to get what we need." "And if she refuses to talk?" Nikki asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victoria's jaw tightened. "Then we make her talk." A grim decision. They worked quickly, dragging Jordan's limp body to the car. Claire rummaged through their supplies, pulling out anything that could be used to slow the bleeding. The ride was tense, each woman lost in her own thoughts as the weight of their actions bore down on them. As they drove through the darkened streets, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that they were teetering on the edge of something irreversible. Every decision they made seemed to push them further into the shadows, further away from the people they had once been. "Do you think Sharon's still alive?" Claire asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Victoria's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "She has to be. Jordan wouldn't have kept her alive this long if she didn't need her for something." "And if we're wrong?" Nikki asked, her voice filled with a quiet desperation. Victoria didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was, she didn't know. But she refused to give up hope. Not yet. The road ahead. As they pulled into the secluded safe house, Victoria glanced at the rearview mirror, her gaze landing on Jordan's pale face. She looked fragile now, nothing like the monster who had haunted their lives for so long. It was almost hard to believe that this was the same woman who had caused so much pain and destruction. But Victoria knew better than to let her guard down. Jordan was dangerous, even in her weakened state. And if they weren't careful, she could still destroy them all. They carried Jordan inside, laying her on the cold floor. Claire immediately set to work, trying to stabilize her condition. Nikki stood off to the side, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression a mix of fear and determination. As Victoria watched them, a sense of unease settled over her. They had crossed so many lines already, done so many things they could never take back. And yet, the path ahead seemed darker than ever. For now, all they could do was wait, and pray that Jordan would wake up with the answers they so desperately needed. But deep down, Victoria knew that even if Jordan talked, the nightmare was far from over.